I proposed to my fiancée, Emily, in the middle of a busy restaurant. Not exactly the romantic moment I'd always imagined. A few weeks later, we finally found time to celebrate with a weekend away together. We rented a small lake house deep in northern Wisconsin. The listing promised complete privacy. No nearby cabins. No crowds. Just a quiet lake surrounded by miles of forest. It sounded perfect. The drive took almost 5 hours. By the time we arrived, the sun was already setting behind the trees. The place looked exactly like the pictures. A wooden cabin sitting only a few yards from the water. Large windows overlooked the lake. A small dock stretched out into the calm water. The nearest road wasn't even visible from the property. It was so quiet that we could hear nothing except birds and the wind moving through the trees. Emily smiled the moment she stepped out of the car. "This is exactly what I needed," she said. We unpacked our bags, ordered takeout from a small town 20 minutes away, and spent the rest of the evening sitting on the porch. It felt like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. The next morning was even better. The lake looked completely still. Not a single boat. Not a single person. After breakfast, we carried 2 chairs down near the shoreline and spent hours talking about the wedding. Around noon, Emily stood up. "I'm going inside for a minute." I nodded and stayed where I was, skipping rocks across the water. She disappeared into the house. Maybe 30 seconds later, I heard someone scream. It wasn't close enough to sound like it came from beside me. It sounded like it came from somewhere beyond the cabin, somewhere inside the woods. A woman's scream. Loud. Sure. Just once. I dropped the rock in my hand and took off running. My first thought wasn't anything supernatural. I thought Emily had been attacked. Or maybe she'd fallen down the back steps. By the time I reached the porch, my heart was racing. The front door suddenly opened. Emily stepped outside holding a bottle of water. She stopped when she saw me. "What happened?" I stared at her for a second. "I thought I heard you scream." She frowned. "I've been inside the whole time." "You didn't hear that?" "Hear what?" "The scream." She slowly shook her head. There wasn't any scream. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. I looked past the house toward the trees. Everything was completely still. No movement. No birds flying away. Nothing. I even walked a little way toward the tree line. There were no footprints. No voices. No sign that anyone had been there. Emily eventually laughed. "You probably heard some kind of animal." "I don't think animals sound like that." "Maybe not. But if someone was really screaming..." She looked around the empty shoreline. "Wouldn't they still be calling for help?" She had a point. If someone had been in danger, one scream didn't make much sense. Eventually I convinced myself I'd simply misheard something. We spent the rest of the afternoon by the lake. We cooked dinner outside, watched the sunset, took pictures together. By the time darkness covered the water, the strange scream had almost slipped out of my mind. Around 10:30 we went upstairs to bed. Emily fell asleep almost immediately. I didn't. No matter how tired I felt, sleep just wouldn't come. I checked my phone. 1:18 a.m. Trying not to wake Emily, I quietly climbed out of bed and headed downstairs. I figured watching TV for a while might help. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down in the living room. The television played quietly in the background. That's when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to during the day. The living room was surrounded by enormous windows. During daylight, they gave an incredible view of the lake. At 1 in the morning, they felt completely different. Every window had turned into a black mirror, and for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be standing out there, watching me. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere. Of course it felt creepy at night. I turned my attention back to the television. Less than a minute later, I heard it again. The same scream. Exactly the same. A woman, loud enough to make my heart stop. This time it sounded much closer, like it came from somewhere just outside the house. I muted the TV. Silence. I slowly stood up and walked toward the largest window. Outside was nothing but darkness. The moon reflected across the lake, but beyond that, I couldn't see anything. The trees weren't moving. The water was completely still. I stood there for almost a minute expecting someone to appear. Nobody did. I stepped back from the window. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe my mind was connecting random sounds into something that wasn't real. I rubbed my eyes and turned away. 3 heavy knocks echoed through the cabin. Knock, knock, knock. Every hair on my arm stood up. The knocks came from the front door. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then a woman's voice spoke. Hello. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling. Is someone inside? I slowly walked toward the door. I think I'm lost. Could you please help me? She sounded frightened, like someone who had been walking through the woods for hours. Any normal person would have wanted to help, but something felt wrong. There were no cars, no roads nearby, no reason for anyone to be standing outside this cabin after 1 in the morning. She spoke again. I'm really cold. Please, just open the door. The strange part wasn't what she said. It was how confident she sounded, like she already knew. I was standing right behind the door. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. A woman stood on the porch. She wasn't facing the lake. She was facing the door, perfectly still. She looked older than her voice suggested. Her arms hung stiffly at her sides. She wasn't shivering. She wasn't looking around. She didn't move at all. She simply stared at the door, waiting. I don't know why, but something about her made every instinct tell me not to unlock it. I kept watching. 10 seconds passed. Then 15. She never blinked, never shifted her weight. Nothing. I slowly reached for the deadbolt, just enough to unlock it. Maybe ask if she needed emergency services. The second my fingers touched the lock, her hand shot toward the doorknob. She grabbed it so quickly that I jumped backward. Almost at the exact same moment, her voice became soft again. Please. I know you're there. Just let me in. I ran upstairs without saying a word. Emily woke up the moment I turned on the bedroom light. What happened? There's someone outside. Before she could answer, 3 more knocks echoed through the cabin. She heard them too. Her face changed immediately. We stayed upstairs for another minute, listening. Nothing. Finally, we walked downstairs together. I looked through the peephole again. The porch was empty. I opened the curtains just enough to see outside. No woman. No footprints. No flashlight. Nothing. We locked every door, pushed a chair against the entrance, and stayed awake until sunrise. The moment daylight filled the trees, we packed everything into the car. Neither of us wanted to spend another night there. On the drive home, Emily finally asked me one question. If she really needed help, why didn't she keep knocking? I didn't have an answer. It's been years since that trip. We're married now. We've stayed in dozens of cabins since then, but never another one that was completely isolated. Sometimes I still think about that woman. Not because she knocked on the door, but because somehow she knew I was standing behind it before I made a single sound.